is implied. Then the solution is implied, isn't it? So let's look at what he says is the cause, because this is the radical difference. And this is the part that we might like Buddhism, we might like some aspects of Buddhism, but this one we don't like going into. We can't hear it properly. So what he's saying is there are two main causes, principal causes. When you study Buddhist philosophy, there are many kinds of causes. Principal, substantial, main, secondary, there's all kinds. And it's very precise, it's very good. It's like a flower. What's the main cause of a flower? Is the seed, it's obvious. If the water and the soil were the main cause of that rose, you'll be in big trouble. You can put water in the soil till the cows come home. If there's no seed there, you won't get a flower, you won't get a rose. So the seed is the main cause. And then on the other hand, with just a seed holding it in the sky for 47 years without water and soil, you won't get one. So you need them all together. There's a main cause, and then there are these secondary, or the conditions that all have to come together to produce the rose. Once you understand that logic, you'll get a rose every time. Buddha's like that, with suffering and happiness. So what are the main causes? And we're just looking at the first kind of suffering, forget the more deep ones, the subtle ones. And we first were discussing ourselves. And this is where he says there are two main ones: karma, delusions. Just two things. And whose karma and whose delusions? The big shock is mine. What's the first shock? Because the samsaric view, deeply in our bones, our mother didn't have to teach us. This is actually the view of ego. It's coming programmed in our mind from believing in it for so long, Buddha says. We become programmed with this view deep in our bones, which is why we believe it so strongly. And this is the first fundamental mistake from the Buddhist perspective, which is so intense, it's so hard to hear it. So karma, that means we have to understand karma. Well, that's the first scope. That's the analysis of the law of karma, what it means, how it plays out, and that takes real time to think about. The biggest problem with karma is because we hear religion, here we're talking religious philosophy, and we're used to it if we've been Muslims or Hindus or Christians. And so naturally we have this dualistic view of punishment and reward, deep in our bones. Don't blame your Catholic mother or your Jewish mother for that. That's the dualistic view of having, even in the first place, ego grasping, the dualistic view that believes I'm this innocent victim, I didn't ask to get born, and it's true, if you're a Christian or a Jew, forgive me, or a Muslim, God made you. He did not ask if he didn't consult you. He didn't, do you mind if I make you, Robina? And then you say yes, and you can collude in it at least. I'm not being rude, well, I probably sounds it, but it's the philosophical view. Now, if you can have faith in a creator, you're sailing, you'll have a great life, pretty profound. But the other view, the materialist one, is instead of God, it's your mum and dad, isn't it? They made you, and they definitely did not consult you. They leapt into bed and you came out. They chuck you on this earth, this is how we feel. They chuck you on this planet, and then bad things and good things happen, and you don't seem to have anything to do with it. That's actually the way we can describe the way ego feels, as an innocent victim who didn't ask to get born, who has no say in life, who got plonked on this planet. No wonder we live in fear, if it is really like that. And then we don't know why bad things happen, and we don't know why good things happen. We don't mind why good things happen, we just want more, please. But the bad, we have a mental breakdown every time they go wrong. They come, So we don't have an analysis. We do have an analysis, a very detailed one, which is the outside world is the cause of our suffering and our happiness. So we have an analysis of the body, we have an analysis of the mother, the father, the genes, the DNA, the events. So when a person punches you in the nose, as far as this analysis is concerned, there is one cause of my suffering, and it's the person who punched. And then anger comes, and then we have them to be punished. That's the view we have. This is the view of the universe. This is the view the dogs and monkeys have. Look at their behavior. So it's shocking to hear that Buddha isn't that one. He's not saying it's not true. He's not saying that the punch doesn't play a role. But it's one of the secondary causes of your suffering. Equally, the happiness. Why are you happy, Robina? Well, George gave me $100. No, he's only a secondary cause. That's the way to think, but this really takes analysis because it's completely opposite to the instinctive feeling we have. So really take some time to unpack this view of karma, which is that every millisecond of what you think and do and say, any sentient being, every millisecond of what goes on in our mind, a dog and monkey and humans as well, and every millisecond of what we do with our body and speech on the basis of what's in our mind, that's the process, putting it very simply, that produces the person I become. As Dalai Lama says, we're our own creators. Karma is like self-creation. It's the best way to hear it, but we can't hear it like initially. What we hear it as is an alternative to punishment. You know, oh, you mean I'm the blame? I'm getting punished? That's how we think. That's how we hear it. So it really takes thinking about to hear it as not that. But initially, that's how we hear it, because that's the view we have already. Punishment and reward. There's no such thing in Buddhism. There's no punisher. There's no rewarder. When it comes to the fundamental natural laws, okay, you can decide, like if you live in a monastery, Lord Buddha started putting rules together. So yes, you get punished if you put your rice under the thing, and like you go begging, and if you're a monk or something, and you go begging and you want the rice, you're attached to the rice, so you put the rice underneath to show the next person got no rice. Then that breaks a law. That breaks one of Buddha's rules. There's that kind of rules. Like with the fundamentals about reality, they're natural laws. This I can't stress enough, and we have to keep remembering like this. There's no equivalent of like God's law. In the world, we have natural law, and why that term even came is because the assumption was God's law, which was the only one that existed back in our Western culture, back at the time of before Mr. Galileo came along and started making trouble. There was only God's law. That was what the only science there was. So since then, gradually from Mr. Galileo onwards, we've now got the separate body of knowledge called scientific law, which is natural law. And Buddha would totally agree. He's looking on thinking, aren't you great? You know, fantastic. But we've chucked the baby out the bathwater a bit. So the crucial point here, we know it all. We know the Buddha's not a creator. We know vaguely that doesn't posit one, but we haven't thought it through, you know. We've got to think about it logically. It's not just he's just being feisty and being argumentative. Oh, there's no Buddha, there's no creator, chuck it out, I'm going to decide something else. Not like that. That's why I always quote that experience I had, that example of a man in New Zealand asking this question. It's the first time and last time I've ever had that question, which is a brilliant question. He happened to be a scientist. He said, who revealed the teachings to the Buddha? It's a perfect question, because that's what we think of as religion, isn't it? From on high, a creator who is the boss, who does not have a cause, who is permanent and unchanging, and who decides, for whatever reason, I don't know what they say why God creates the universe is for, but that's God's business. I'm not being sarcastic. God creates me and the rules. So therefore he's the boss. So therefore he has the power to punish and reward. That's the view we have, you know. That's how we hear. So we move into Buddhism, we like Buddhism, and then we just hear it's an alternative to that. So we hear karma as guilt and neurotic, and I'm bad and as punishment. And we just beat ourselves up even more. It's just not, it's not the view. It's not the view. So when that scientist said, who revealed the teaching to the Buddha, I said, would you ask Einstein? Who revealed relativity to him? And of course he and we all laughed. It's like a joke. Why? It's because we know that Einstein is this intelligent fellow who is observing the natural world. He wasn't looking in the sky. No one came and revealed things to him. He didn't make it up. It's not speculation. And he's not demanding we believe him. It is right that a creator who makes the universe asks you to believe him, because you can't prove God's right. That means you become God too, and that's not possible, not the way the Christians talk. You've got to think these things. You've got to think this through. It's not just intellectual cleverness. This is all inbuilt into Buddha's views. So who is Buddha then? Who is this person? A human being who his mind became, you know, different teachings. And the Mahayana say he was already a Buddha and he manifested as a human. The Theravada say he became a Buddha as his steps, as indicated by his own practice. You know, he showed the steps of becoming a Buddha. So we'll keep that one for now. So here's this person, you know, first educated in that incredible Indian system before the Buddha, which only now are we in our modern world starting to notice that there was this extraordinary body of knowledge around, well, 3,000 years ago. As I quote repeatedly, as His Holiness says, it was these amazing Indians more than 3,000 years ago who began the investigation to the self. not as we think, Mr. Freud 100 years ago. So he went as far as he could go. These genius Indians had already found the method of how to give up the first kind of suffering, the lower realms and the gross suffering. They understood that because they have the view of karma. They've already found the method to get rid of the second kind of suffering, giving up attachment, same as the Lord Buddha. He didn't chuck all that out. The third level, they didn't go far enough, he said. So he diverged in his own direction, specifically in relation to his own direct experiential findings and his own mind, from his own research, his own analysis, his own observation about the nature of self. That's where he diverged, and now we have Buddhism. So it's a joke to say who revealed it to him. That's the view of religion, not the Buddha's view. So Buddha, like Einstein, I always say this, but I'm not being sarcastic and making it sound sort of clever, used his own intelligence, but of course a level of mind that we don't even posit as existing, because these genius Indians invented this brilliant technique called single point of concentration, which enables you to go to these subtler levels of mind that we don't even posit as existing in neuroscience and modern psychology. You've got to remember that. He accessed these subtle levels of mind and finally removed all the nonsense from the mind that is the source of the suffering, and literally enlightened his own mind. And then he presents his findings and he presents his methodology. He says, over to you, honey. You want to do what I did? Here's how you do it. Just like Einstein. He didn't say, believe me. You're not squashing E equals M squared into your mind. You're not squashing 1 + 1 is 2 into your mind. 1 + 1 is 2 to try to force to believe it. You prove it. And as Dalai Lama tells us modern people, if you can go through the steps 1 step at a time and you can prove the Buddha's wrong, then of course you must reject him. Of course you must. That's the kind of rigor that we're really seriously practicing, we have to use. It's a big surprise to us, I think. So the Buddha's view that he's telling us, if he's seen to be true, the 2 main sources of suffering, and you flip that over, the 2 main causes of happiness, karma, and then instead of delusions, there'll be virtues. So we have to understand karma first, which is this natural law that Buddha has observed. Clearly, you've got to have a subtle level of mind to observe that. You can't observe with your eyes. You can't observe with a microscope. It's much subtler. But it's been observed, and it's dealt with in enormous, depth and breadth in the body of knowledge, all the teachings over the centuries. That minds, consciousnesses are beginningless and endless. Many different Buddhist views say it is endless. It does end. That the Prasangika Madhyamika view would say no. Beginningless and endless. And the law that runs it, if you like, that runs this mind of ours, or the law within which our mind runs, this law of cause and effect, such that whatever we think and do and say programs our mind and produces the person we become and produces our future experiences. That's the simplest way to say karma. That's it. Very simple. It's rather delicious. It shows you're the boss. So if it's true, if your happiness and suffering come from what you do, think and say, and you don't want suffering and you want happiness, well, honey, child, it's evident. You better learn the law and abide by it. If you want flowers and not weeds, you better learn botany. That's it. Same thing. Not complicated. And the second cause, and they subsume to this first one, that the second one, delusions, means what goes on in the mind. So the mind for the Buddha is the boss of the universe. All experiences since beginning this time of all sentient beings, they are rooted in what's in the mind. So Buddha's expertise is the mind. So there are 2 causes of suffering. This first kind, forget the next 2, when the bad things happen, the first one. So when you know this for yourself, and that really takes time to apply. It really takes time to apply. We all know this, because whenever even the tiniest bad thing happens, the tiniest, a person looks mean at you in the bus. I mean, something as small as even a stranger tooting their horn. We don't say toot. What do we say? Honk. Toot is a nicer word, I think. Honk. What do we honk our horn? What do we do? What do we do with our horn? Honk it. I prefer to toot it. It's so sweet, isn't it? Toot your horn. Indians, they say, on the back of trucks in India, one of their technique, they demand you to honk your horn. It's one of the things you're supposed to do, so to warn people. So all the roads in India are packed with buses and cars blasting their horns. You get sued if you blast your horn in America, I think. Anyway, whatever, talking here. So even we know the smallest thing that happens to us when it's not what we want, which is what attachment doesn't want, we get upset, which is the mild version of anger, which is the thought, how dare that happen to me? How dare you do that to me? I don't deserve it. That's the best way to define anger. It's the feeling that arises, isn't it? It's hurt, and it's unfair, which means I don't deserve it. This we could spend weeks doing analysis and meditating on to try to find the fault in that misconception. But this is so primordial. We all have this. And then you know what? When something good happens, because attachment wants the good things, we take it for granted, and sort of there's an assumption we deserve it. It's very fascinating, this. This is really the analysis of attachment and aversion. It's really is, the more we look into this, it's fascinating, because this is the analysis in Buddha's view about the mind. That if what goes on in our mind is the source of our suffering, and then what goes on in our mind which causes us to do negative things, which then causes us to suffer in the future, it all comes down to the mind, then we have to know what goes on in the mind. So we have to understand the laws of karma, just the nuts and bolts of it, and then we have to do the analysis of the mind. This is the nuts and bolts of Buddhist stuff. If we want to practice Buddhism, not just be mindful and watch our breath, walk slowly, not like that. Because the view is so different. And it's opposite to the instinctive view that we have. We don't even doubt as the truth. That's why it's so hard to practice it, you know. So it's a bit like if you don't know the laws of botany, you can only go so far with your garden. You've got to have an analysis of what and why and how. Then you can really be in charge of your garden. So like here too, same. Unless we study it, and it's quite hard. It means you've got to squeeze your brain to study these views, you know, and then slowly internalize them so they become natural to you. Like every time you're in the garden, once you've studied your botany, you don't have your book in front of you. And what'll I do now? Put the sand here, put the seed here. Now I look at the book again, put the water there. You learn to know it. Like with driving a car, you internalize. You don't have your book next to you. What gear do I go into now? Look at the book. You'll be dead. You internalize it. Same here. If you haven't studied it first, what can you internalize? It's just confusing to us. So the view of karma, if you take the view that your consciousness does not come from mummy or daddy or God or a superior being, and it can't come from nothing, so the only logical deduction is the beginningless continuity of mental moments, which is the nuttiest idea we have ever heard, because we utterly believe there has to be a first moment. It's a really strong point. Buddha says that's not logical. It's not viable. You can't have a first moment. Because if you can posit a first moment of anything, an absolute first moment, that means that first moment did not have a cause, which means nothingness is its cause, and that's demented. That's why the Christians, and I'm not being rude, it's fascinating, the Catholics spend a lot of their time in their philosophy describing how there can be a first cause, God. Buddha disagrees with all this. He's got extensive arguments and logic to disprove that. It's not just to be argumentative, because the view of karma is actually, and if we take it in a positive way, it's empowering. Because not every moment of our suffering is a result of what I've done, but every moment of my happiness I'm the creator of both. But our trouble is we only hear it in terms of negative. We take the good for granted, and then we have a panic attack when bad happens. How dare that happen to me? I don't deserve it. We have to go much deeper than that. If we could just even, most of us think only about the bad things. We don't think about the good things. We take them for granted. Why? Because attachment's an assumption that I deserve good things and don't deserve bad. This is kind of a powerful concept, actually. Forget karma now, but look into this. Well, it brings in karma, actually. This is really quite subtle. One way that talking about ego and the voices of ego, attachment and aversion, actually they are assumptions, deeply held assumptions. The assumption of attachment is I deserve good things. I only deserve happiness. I only deserve good things. That's really what it's saying, the deepest one, way deep down. And aversion or anger, when bad things happen, when attachment doesn't get what it wants, that's the assumption that I don't deserve bad things. And this is where our pain is. This is where the pain is unbearable. Because mostly we can't see why that bad thing happened to me. Even if I'm fighting with my hubby and he shouts at me and then I shout at him, even though I know I shouted at him, when he says those brutal words, still the feeling of I don't deserve it arises, even though I shouted at him. The feeling of when we're hurt is so strong. The hurt is real. The hurt is real. But it comes from this misconception that I'm an innocent victim that had nothing to do with being born, and somehow things happen unfairly. We don't mind that good happens unfairly. We call that good luck, but we don't like the bad luck. And that's why we feel such pain. This is totally fascinating. We think we feel pain because the hubby said those mean words. No. The pain I experience, triggered by the mean words, catalyzed by the mean words, they're secondary cause. The pain I experience is the direct result of these misconceptions deep in the bones of my mind. This is totally fascinating, but we can't just come to that out of the blue. You've got to, as Lama Yeshe says, I can tell you about attachment for a whole year. We'll never begin to understand it until we start looking deeply inside. That's why we suffer. This is shocking to us, so shocking. This is literally, because the Buddha says, second noble truth, karma, the actions you did set you up to have that experience, and then the delusions in your mind when you did it, and then the delusions when the suffering is, when this thing happens and that are triggered. This is fascinating analysis. It's fascinating. We have to hear it properly. And then slowly argue with it. Use the Buddha's view, which is the one we're buying into, to counteract that painful instinctive feeling. That's practice, people, every day of the week, every second of the day. This is being your own therapist. This is applying Buddhist psychology. That's why it's so shocking, because if we're really practicing this, it has got nothing to do with your husband. But we are so obsessed with the belief that the hubby's part of the cause. We have to have intermediaries and mediators and psychiatrists and counselling to both listen to each other, because I'm convinced you're the cause of my suffering and you're convinced I'm the cause of yours. And we have to come to some kind of agreement between us. All, in a sense, all a waste of time. I'm not being brutal. It's a waste of time. You don't get to the point. But this is why it's so intense. This is Buddha's analysis. It's up to us if we like it or not and work with it. It just takes time, that's all. So my point here is, when we know this for ourselves, that I am suffering because of my delusions, forget the karma. I am suffering because of my anger. I am suffering because of my attachment. I am suffering because of my depression. And you don't look into the external events. You can if you like, but they're not the real point. That's the shocking bit, because in our therapy style, they're the point. You've got to dredge up from your memory all the bad things that happen, because they are why you're angry. They are why you're depressed, not for the Buddha. This is very, very shocking. It doesn't mean you can't remember, but if you do remember the bad things that happened, all that tells you is that they were the things that triggered your anger, which you brought with you. That didn't cause your anger. You were angry. Anger was in your mind from having practiced it before, and that event triggered it. That's the analysis. So if you can remember the bad event, that's fine, to let you know that it triggered what was in your mind already. That's the key point about karma. And that takes time. You've got to be very precise, really. That's what I'm getting at here. So, yeah. So when you know that for yourself, then you open your eyes and see everybody else. Now, you won't only have compassion for the people who have bad things happen to them, but you're only the victims. You'll have compassion for all people who have any bad thing happen to them, even if they're a psychopath, because you know they created the cause. And second, you will know that their mind itself, their delusions, their anger, their depression, their anxiety, their psychopathy, whatever word we use, that is the main source of their pain. Then you will have compassion. But you cannot have that until you have it for yourself. And that's the piece. This is the piece we miss in the West. This is the first kind of suffering. Well, no, it's the second kind of suffering too. It's called the suffering of change. And really, it's broadly, that's to do with attachment, and I'll describe in a minute. But broadly, the second level of suffering is just the mind itself, the delusions themselves, all the delusions. Not just the bad thing, being punched in the nose or stolen from, but just having the delusions. In a sense, that is broadly the subtler, more nuanced level of suffering, which is the one we have to really learn to become familiar with. And in a sense, for ourselves, that's what real self-compassion is. Self-compassion isn't just having a little rest and a relax and a massage. Nothing wrong with that. We need to do that. This analysis of karma and delusions is where how to be compassionate to ourselves, because this is why we're suffering. Buddha wants us to weep in compassion for ourselves, not beat ourselves up, which is what we love to do. He's telling us why we suffer. But we just hear it as punishment, because that's the model we're used to. So this demands incredible inner awareness, why we need to do some practice every day. This demands incredible awareness of what the hell is going on in our mind second by second. This is already itself incredibly difficult. Forget about trying to concentrate and make all your thoughts go away. That's stupid. Develop a practice, watching your breath, I don't care, so that at least for 5 minutes you're stepping out of your head. And then you're training yourself to have a bit more self-awareness, instead of being absorbed in all your thoughts. For that 5 minutes, you might have chaotic mind, you mightn't have concentration, who cares? You've developed the ability to step out of your head and you're observing what's happening. So when you come down to the sink in the kitchen or the car on the freeway, you're not only just observing the cars or the hubby slurping his coffee, you're also observing what's going on in your mind. God, this is the one. And you're able to locate it and identify it. There's anger rising, there's jealousy, there's resentment, there's anger, there's depression. All these emotions have names, but we wait till they vomit out the mouth before we notice them, and it's too late. That's why we have to start noticing, have our practice, and get one skill from that is to have this self-awareness, literally. So you're washing the dishes. Excuse me, I have to choke myself. When you're washing the dishes, and hubby's slipping the coffee, or the kids not doing what you want. They're the external events. And normally we're totally focused on that. And then we only notice you're angry when your words vomit out your mouth. Oh, I must be angry. We only notice it then, and that's the tragedy. So with your practice every day, whatever kind of practice it is, there's lots of other things happening. You're purifying and having long-term benefits. But the immediate short-term benefit is that you're starting to get some awareness of what's in here. So when you open your eyes and go down the sink, go to the sink or the car, you're also noticing what's happening in here. And that's the job of being a Buddhist. This is true. I promise this is the job of being a Buddhist. Being your own therapist, Lama Zopa puts it so beautifully. And the wisdom comes from that. We have to be like a hawk, watching our mind. The beginning practice is already pretty intense, and we don't even do that properly. We can't do the second one of watching our mind until we've done the first one, which is watch your body and speech. This is a surprise to us. This is the first level of practice. Control your body and speech. Control the servants of your mind. At least don't say the bad words. If we all had good behavior on the planet, nobody would kill anybody. Nobody would steal or lie or kill. It's miraculous. But that's what we're missing. We're missing, we've got uncontrolled body and speech because we're vomiting out everything we feel because we don't notice what we're feeling until it comes out the mouth. It's just too late. The first level is live in vows, practice discipline, control the body, control the speech, live in vows and purify every day. That's a tremendously powerful practice. And then when you're at the sink and hubby's slurping the coffee, you're noticing your mind and you don't open your mouth. He's not going to know there's any problem. You're working on your mind. You're being your own therapist. Then you both control your speech and you even can control your mind. This is the miracle. This is Buddhist practice. Don't mystify it. That's Buddhist practice. Success in our practice comes from this. And then we develop more and more clarity, more and more awareness at ever subtle levels of what the hell is going on in this chaotic mind of ours. That's the skill we can cultivate to degrees of subtlety and brilliance that we can't even imagine in modern psychology. Of course, when we get single point of concentration. This is the wisdom wing. Compassion wing, based on success at this one, is how you benefit others. As His Holiness says, compassion is not enough. We need wisdom, which is the nuts and bolts of this. It's like the retreat mode. It's the work you do inside. Nobody else's business. That needs masses of practice and clear analysis of the things we're talking about. So then, once we know our mind more and more and are aware of our behavior more and more and start to really be in charge of who we are, not as a victim of external circumstances, which brings courage and self-confidence, we then can start to see how the compassion we do have gets all muddled and messy and polluted by our attachment. That's the tricky bit. Because right now we have compassion, but it's messed up by our delusions. We don't see. We have to have wisdom, and wisdom is what comes from working on yourself. Wisdom is nothing fancy. You've got levels of wisdom, of course. It just means being clear, clarity. What's going on, So with our compassion, we do see what's compassion. Delusions, this is the first category of states of mind, as we've talked often enough, and they are, generally speaking, conceptual states of mind that misrepresent things to us. So when anger's in the mind, it misrepresents the person as more ugly than they are. When attachment's in the mind, it misrepresents the thing or the object or the event as more delicious than it really is. So this really throws us in our analysis. So if you've got, like, I always use the example, you've got an alcoholic brother, simple example, person you do love. You love him, you want him to be happy. Love is may you be happy. That's a virtue. But you're also attached to him. Attachment is, this because you're close to your brother, you adore him, and the attachment is the kind of unhappy, anxiety, kind of neurotic part of you that wants everything to be lovely. There's your damn brother being an alcoholic, which is not lovely. So your attachment gets upset. He's messing up your life. It's inconvenient. He's making things difficult for you. He's causing you to be unhappy because attachment doesn't like having problems. So your attachment then sticks its nose in under the guise of being compassionate. You are compassionate, but it pollutes your compassion and it sticks your nose in trying to make him change. Acting like you're doing it for his sake. But because you've got no wisdom, the attachment makes you stick your nose into his business. You act like you're being compassionate, but you're barging in where you don't belong. He hasn't asked for advice and you stick your nose in, you tell him to do this and go to AA and do this. You talk about him behind his back, you blame him for making mum and dad upset because he vomits in the soup. All this busy rubbish, it's all attachment energy, all blood kind of scattered and jagged. It's all I-based. You've got some compassion, but it's dragged down and there's no wisdom. So he falls off the wagon again, you get annoyed with him and you give him up and you get angry and all that stuff. So that's not coming from compassion. Compassion has to have wisdom, clarity, meaning you have to be, you know him enough to know that the advice you will give him, he will want that advice and will, you know, and he'll be able to put it into practice. And you know, most of the time people don't want your advice. They didn't ask you, you come barging in. You know what other people are like with you. They look at you with doggy eyes because they feel sorry for you. You know, they're all talking about you behind your back. Poor Robina, she's, you know, she eats too much, the poor thing. Oh, Robina, how are you? You can't, it's revolting how people stick their nose in your life and look at you with sad eyes. They all talk about you, they exaggerate your problem, and they tell you what to do. You know how horrible it is. That's what we do in families and friends, you know. So leave him alone, do not talk about him, mind your own business, have compassion, watch him, and want him to be happy, want him not to suffer. And then one day you might see there's an opportunity when he's ready to hear your advice, then it's time to give it. It's much more peaceful, it's quieter, and it's more genuine in its empathy. Attachment makes a fuss and bother, you know, rushing around, ridiculous. We think it's compassion, it's not. It makes a mess of our compassion. So then the other, this is as we said before, this is the shocking part. We think we suffer because we have compassion for suffering people. Forget your brother, but the world in general. This is a really shocking thing to think about. You might be very compassionate, have a really soft heart. You might have, and that's amazing if you do. And you're overwhelmed when you see the war in Ukraine and all the suffering and the poor animals suffering and the environment suffering. It literally becomes overwhelming for you. So naturally, we think we are suffering because of compassion. No, you're not. Compassion is a virtue. You can't possibly suffer because of a virtue. This is why this analysis of the Buddha of non-virtues and virtues is incredibly important to understand. You cannot possibly suffer if you have love and compassion. It is not possible. So why do we suffer? Because of attachment. So like with a brother, your compassion is there, my poor brother suffering, but your attachment is literally upset. It gets upset because his alcoholism is making a mess of your life. It's inconvenient. He's making a problem for you. So then you get aversion or you get depressed. So whether it's the whole world or your brother, when all the suffering is out there, you do have compassion, but it's mixed with this incredible attachment in you, which is the craving, the hunger to only see nice things. You see, attachment's so fragile. It only wants nice experiences. So as soon as the world has wars and problems and terrorism, that upsets your attachment. So you have a panic attack and you get aversion. You either go kill people or you get depressed, or you kill yourself. So you don't suffer because of love and compassion. You suffer because of attachment and aversion. This is very shocking to hear. This is the Buddhist analysis. It's incredible. It's liberating when we can see it. Because when you get to the level of being a bodhisattva, let's say, beyond attachment, beyond anger, they're perky the whole damn time. I mean, Lama Zopa, when Venerable Roger in Courtin, when I was there for 2 weeks after Rinpoche passed away, and Venerable Roger just gave a short talk, you know, mainly about the way Rinpoche just pushed his body to the limit during his life, right? Being this extraordinarily compassionate person. We have to deduce that he had no delusions, no ego, no non-virtue, only compassion. And so I talked about, for example, how, you know, for these people like this, any moment of bad things happening, it becomes this delicious grist for the mill where their compassion like increases 1,000,000 times. So they had a stroke in 2011. I remember I was in Australia when it happened. It was at Shantideva Center. And then that night they took him to hospital, the Catholic hospital down, there's a small city, Bendigo. They took him to the Catholic hospital. And then Roger was kind of videoing, he videoed a message from Rinpoche. There's Rinpoche the next morning. We saw the video, kind of all bloated because of all these drugs he had, and he had a stroke. And he looked and sounded like a drunken sailor. Do you understand? No words could come out of his mouth properly, but he was laughing. These Catholic nuns could not get over this weird group of Tibetan monks and Australian monks who were laughing. Most people have mental breakdown and collapse, and there's tears and drama and suffering when they have a stroke. Remember, Roger said every second, whenever he was doing anything, it increased his compassion 1,000,000 times for the people who made the sheets and the pillows he walked on, the people in the water. He was thinking about the people in the water while he was in there doing his exercises to try and unstroke himself and all the other people with stroke. He's blowing mantras in the water. Whatever he's doing is only continuously thinking of others and having compassion for people who are suffering. I mean, it's hard to imagine this when clearly himself is suffering with his stroke, you know. So when you are a bodhisattva like that, you cannot say that you're suffering. You're not technically suffering. Suffering is the fruit of delusions. We use this word suffering to be much more than it really is from the Buddhist perspective. Suffering is by definition the fruit of non-virtue and harming others. Suffering is not compassion. Having a body of pain, which he did, he had pain. He had painful feelings in his body, that's true. But his mind, it wasn't suffering. He wasn't suffering. He only had compassion. It's hard to imagine, but that's the Buddha's path. To know that's a possibility, then you track yourself according to those levels, you know. So then when you know that you're not at that level yet, then you know why you're suffering now, and you just got a pain in the knee. This is the point about too, your alcoholic brother, the event, it's true, he is an alcoholic. And then there's your compassion, that is valid, it's good, you want him to not suffer. But then the attachment sticks its nose in, and that's the bit that drags you down, that's the bit that makes you neurotic, and that's the bit that makes you suffer. It's exactly the same as here. There is a pain in your knee. It's a fact, knee, pain. There is a fact, it's a fact. But then your interpretation of it, that's the problem, not the knee. So Lama Zopa had this stroke, it's a fact. But he didn't suffer because his interpretation was so insanely different. So this is the key. This is what practice is. You've got one is your pain and two is your interpretation. So the usual interpretation, because attachment is a junkie that only wants no pain. The second even the slightest pain comes, instantaneously attachment is not getting what it wants, and it necessarily turns into aversion. So that'll either be anger and you curse. Of course I'm angry, I hurt my knee, we'll say. No, not of course. It's because attachment didn't get what it wanted. Or you get depressed, or it's poor me. We all understand this is normal behavior. So it takes time. It's a massive practice, but it's ongoing every second, programming your mind, reprogramming. So the event, alcoholic brother or pain in the knee, is one thing, fact. Ukraine war, fact. That's not a delusion, that's a fact. Then it's your interpretation of it, that's the thing to look at. And this is the point about the mind. And the awareness of what's in the mind, the interpretation of the knee, the alcoholic brother or the war, that's the skill, and that demands intense self-awareness that we have to train in, which is why we meditate and do lots of purification practice. It's an incredibly precise job. The pain is one thing, your anger is another. They're separate events. That's what we have to understand. This is an analysis of Buddhist teachings. I'm not making this up. This is a little bit I've studied, not much. This much I can tell you. It's amazing, it's wonderful, it's delicious. And it's a method for stopping suffering. It's a method for helping others. So that's Buddha's analysis for you. 2:20, time to go, practically time to go home almost. So I'll talk for a whole 40 minutes. So what's it? And he just, 50, I'm sorry, 50. And seeing as I talk 3 times the pace of others, it's actually 3.5 hours. People have tested it, I promise you. It's hilarious. Go on then. Yes.
Sorry, I have so many questions, but I mean, one of the things that you were saying about, you call compassion and wisdom the 2 wings, and I remember, I think I read somewhere that they are like the 2 wheels in a chariot. You can't have, the chariot won't
Well,
go.
whatever analogy works for your
Right.
mind.
You have to have them both.
That's right.
And I was thinking, like, if you have wisdom, then you can't not have compassion.
It's a really good point. No, it's a very good point.
Right, but you can have compassion and have no wisdom, right?
Yes, it's just limited compassion. It's polluted by the attachment and the delusions and the I.
Right.
Yes.
I heard somebody refer to that as idiot compassion.
Yeah, we can say like that. Exactly.
Because, for example, when I come out of my building every day, the people on my block, they throw all sorts of food on the ground.
Right.
They think they're feeding the pigeons, and then there are also people who are like feeding cats. And,
I see, okay.
you know, and they're Chinese Buddhists. They go to markets and they buy live fish, and then they release them into the lakes, you know.
So what's the point?
The point is that I think that's kind of like, I mean, idiot compassion.
I understand,
Because
yeah.
they're causing more
No, that's right.
problems.
No, I understand. Of course, exactly. We can see it in the outside world, and of course we can see it in ourselves. Exactly. You're right. Exactly. Exactly right. Yeah. Someone else? Any questions? Any points? Something on there, Sonny? Any in the computer?
Christine English has a
Go on.
question.
Yeah, please. Go. Say it.
Christine? No.
Good afternoon, Venerable Robina.
Hello,
Thank
Christine.
you,
Yes, darling. Absolutely.
thank you very much for your teaching.
Good.
So I'm interested in the information that you're articulating about the wisdom wing and the compassion wing, and that there are these tools within ourselves and with our minds and our own thinking, where we have to cultivate compassion and kindness and awareness and
I'm a bit confused, Christine. Can you sort of cut to the chase and ask a question? Might be helpful.
absolutely. So if in a community that is practicing Buddhism,
Sorry, what? A community?
in a
I want to
community,
know about a community. I want to know about you. Keep it personal. I don't want to know about a community. I couldn't care less about that. That's external world. Tell me about you. Give me your question about the mind. I don't want to know about a community.
what I'm curious as to what is a good practice for conflict resolution that is consistent within our precepts and values.
Do you mean with your boyfriend? Do you mean with a group of people? What do you mean?
All of the above. So that may be a personal relationship or a professional relationship or
Conflict
community.
resolution. I mean, so, okay, if you, why is it down here? Which one? Let me have her here for me. So turn her off there.
So, yeah,
We've got echo. So listen, okay.
no,
Are you having,
Vanderbilt? Ask her to
you
mute
can't
him.
talk to me if she mutes herself.
Right.
So while I'm talking, mute yourself, Christine, darling. Because then as echo goes, doesn't make a difference. It doesn't make a difference. It's me and you both have the sound.
I don't have the sound on.
Sunny, are you muted?
Yes.
There's no sound here over my. How about the mic?
There's no other in this room. I'm asking you, Sonny.
What?
Is there no mic in this room?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
So just, it is, you have to have echoes. So we put up the echo, it's good practice. Okay, so listen, Christine. If, this is what I'm talking about the whole morning, this afternoon, what I'm talking about. When you or me know my mind really well, I will know that I suffer because I've got attachment, and attachment only wants nice things. So then it's gone away now. What happened? What changed? Sean did something. What are you doing, Sean? So we know for the future. All the echoes went away. What?
Sunny muted, that was the difference.
No, now you're unmuted. It doesn't make a difference. Something changed. Did you do something? Oh, him just walking in the room made the difference.
So I muted myself.
Thank you. That's what I kept asking. You said, yeah, that makes a difference. That's right. Two things. That's exactly right. I thought it was that. Thank you so much. So listen, that's what I've been talking about, Christine. So, okay, instead of me answering, why don't you tell me, based on what I've been saying for the last 40 minutes, because the answer to your question is in those 40 minutes, tell me what you heard that you think is the answer to that question. Tell me what you understand. Keep it as brief and clear as you can.
So I'm thinking of a specific situation
No,
where
I'm asking you to tell me, based on what you've heard in this last 40 minutes, try to give yourself the answer to your question based on what I've said in the last 40 minutes.
So I feel like what I have heard in the last 40 minutes is that I need to be practicing, have a regular practice.
No, that's part of, that's not the real analysis. What's the analysis I've given?
Being able to sit with discomfort and have compassion for myself and then for others, so
Well, I
that
didn't say that
I'm
word discomfort ever. You said that. I'm saying I call that having attachment. Do you recognize attachment, which is this little junkie in us that only wants lovely things? Do you recognize that?
yes,
When
yes,
someone's mean to you, that's when that gets upset, isn't it?
yes,
And that's whether it's in a Buddhist center or in an individual relationship, then we think we have to do conflict resolution. But if you can do conflict resolution in yourself and give up the attachment and change it into patience and love, you won't need to talk to the other people. You will have solved your problem. We don't need to have conflict resolution. If you do want to help other people and be a mediator, to help them solve their problem, then you still have to do this work. Then you can be helpful to others.
so in doing my work, I still need to walk back into a boardroom where there's a conflict with another individual.
Okay, so are other people fighting with you or with each other?
It's the topic of the committee.
I don't understand that. Are people arguing with you or with each other?
It not personally towards me, but it's a tenacious topic.
So you
Therefore,
have one view and they have another.
yes, there's
Are there
many
more
views.
is there more than one view? Are there 3 views, 2 views in this boardroom?
4,
So there are 4 different views
correct,
and you've got one of them.
correct,
Now, because of these different views, you fight with each other somehow, trying to solve a problem.
correct.
Okay, so then the real question, if you want, there's 2 things, Christine. One, what's the answer for you to help yourself? And then on the basis of this, what's the answer for you to help others solve the problem? So you've got to first find a way, if you can see these other 3 views are very strong and you don't have much hope for your view to get through, honey child, you give up on your view.
Absolutely.
This is sometimes when you can see there's no way, that demands great humility and patience, and give up on it. Now, if the other 3 views are all fighting, in the end, if you can handle it to help them, that's very kind. But if not, just be quiet. You've got to know where you're at and what you're capable of, that you know you can handle emotionally, Christine. Are we communicating?
Absolutely. Thank you very, very much, Venerable.
Thank you for persevering with me. That's great. Somebody else there? Anybody? I mean, this is really intense stuff, people. It demands incredible kind of clarity about what's happening in here. That's the point, So just vague. And this is why our biggest problem, and I say this all the time, it's so powerful in our culture, because we're not really being brought up with much self-awareness, genuine techniques of self-awareness. It's these days there is more. So therefore, the problem is from the second we wake up in the morning until the second we go to sleep, we know that all our attention is on the outside world. And it demands attention because it's so chaotic. But there's no awareness of what's happening in here. This is the problem, until it vomits out the mouth, until you can't get out of bed one morning because you're depressed, until you're in the middle of an argument. Because but then it's too late. And that's when we leave it. That's why we don't go to the therapist until then. And that's too late. And it's not a joke, but if you can start to see your mind and you just get annoyed with your hubby because he slurps his coffee, that's the time to get techniques to work on your mind. And if you were to go to your therapist and say, I got annoyed, she'll laugh at you until you go back home and wait till you want to kill your husband, then come and see me. Well, that's like saying to the car mechanic, you come and say, please fix my wheels. No, wait till they fall off and then I'll help you. That's insanity. But that's how we are in our world. That's how we are. We wait till the dramas happen. This is a really serious point. That's why we have to have a daily practice to grab what's happening deep in our mind before it gets to the mouth. That's the brilliance of a disciplined practice. This is the key to success, I tell you. Then if we can manage our minds, we would never have mental breakdowns. We would never get stress and anxiety because we're dealing with it in a really powerful way in our own mind. That's really the point. Someone else? Someone else? Any points? Yes.
Beyond the emotional reactions, like to physical pain, there's the emotional reaction of being angry at the pain.
I can't quite hear you, darling. Sorry. I'm sorry. Yes, thank you, if you don't mind.
Yeah. Beyond the emotional response to physical pain,
Yes.
physical pain is just distracting. Like sometimes in the past, I'm not angry at my pain, but I can't think about anything else. It's just the sensation.
I know when it's so dominating, it's true. It can be content, yes.
Is that a question of concentration or self-grasping?
No, I know.
Or both?
No, of course, but I think, okay. I mean, even in the West, not even in the West, but in the medical world, there are so many marvelous people working on methods of dealing with pain. If you can't make it go away, isn't it? And I mean, my good example is ringing in my ears. And lots of people have it. Some people have it really severely, and I know I don't have it as severely as that. But at some point, I went to an audiologist and she asked me to answer questions. Do you feel imprisoned by it? And it's a really strong experience. I'd wake up in the night and I'd panic. I'd have to get up and do things to distract myself, you know. So what I've had to do, forced to do, is learn not to pay attention. It's there all the time. I'm aware of it now. Every second I'm aware when I try to go to sleep, but I've practiced not paying attention to it. I've practiced it doesn't go away, but and we can be distracted. We're always distracted. But because we're so attached to wanting no pain, we get obsessed in the story and we build it up like a drama queen. So it really demands a lot of inner work. And whether it's physical pain as well, that's, you know, or even it's just the same in a sense as my friends in prison who can't get out. It might be physical pain, but it's a nightmare, especially if you're innocent. Some people literally go mad because you're focusing only on that. So you learn to focus on other things, which is what practice is. This is the brilliance of it. It really demands discipline and effort, but we are capable. So if we can change something, please take a pill. If I could take a pill, honey, I don't care how bad the pill is, I'd take it, but I can't. So I have to apply the other one. Otherwise I'd go crazy. So that's, I mean, I'm not saying I'm a saint. Do you understand? But it's a really good example. Do our best. And the other thing is very much, this is really powerful too, about the way the mind works from the Buddhist perspective. That actually, because of certain tendencies, we have a certain way of seeing things. We have one kind of view. But there's 6 and 7 or 10 or 20 ways to see something. You know very well, I mean, I could interview 6 of my prisoners, people I know, and each of them with a similar circumstance of being innocent, but being called guilty. Each one, because of their mind, sees it differently. So it's like you'd read 6 different descriptions. You wouldn't even think it's the same thing. So that's how everything is. So it's almost like we have to train our minds to literally just see things differently and dig a new groove in your mind. And finally, of course, the Buddha's saying there's no, we're very stuck in our views, and then we believe they're real and we can't get out of those grooves. So really the Buddhist approach is radically changing the grooves in our mind, radically, and bringing our grooves, developing valid ones and compassionate ones and wise ones. Do you understand? It's hard work. But to realize we're living in viewpoints and they're very narrow. When we're really stuck in it, we can't see past our own nose. We can't see that we have an alternative view. What do you mean I should change my mind? I'm in prison and I'm an innocent. If you're stuck in that view, you can do nothing. Do you understand? What do you mean I should change my view? The pain is bad. And what we don't therefore see is that much of the suffering is not from the pain, but from the anger. That's the biggest shock, I think, that our interpretation, there's Lama Zopa. Bliss, I mean it blissful, joyful, full of compassion, laughing. Do you understand? So that's kind of powerful if we can think of the possibility. Of course, it's not overnight. Are we communicating? Good. Okay. What else, people? Other questions? Yes, Eileen, sweetheart, talk to me. Unmute, sweetie.
Okay. I know when we take rebirth, we're taking rebirth with everything, the mental continuum. Is the main reason we take rebirth is attachment? The
root delusion, the most subtle, the most primordial, which is the instinctive grasping at an inherent, independent, intrinsic, real, concrete, separate me, is the main cause of rebirth, and therefore all suffering and everything else. So then on the basis of that, attachment then continues to perpetuate that. So you can give up attachment, that the great yogis in the formless realm have given up attachment, but they still are out of samsara because they haven't realized emptiness. So you've got to cut the root delusion. Once you've cut the root delusion, once you've realized emptiness, you can't fall back after that. You can only go forward. you understand?
Yes, I do. Yes.
Okay, darling.
Thank you.
Anything else there, Sonny? No? What else is there? Someone else? Hello, Brenda. You got a question, darling? You doing all right? You okay? Good, sweetheart. Anybody got a question? No? 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 Huh? You? Nothing. All right. 2:40. I mean, it's what time do we start? 1:30, 2:30. It's only an hour and a bit. We don't have to go to the 90 minutes. We can always end.
Whenever you want.
I know, exactly. We can, can't we? And I think we've done plenty today. Haven't we? It's been a bit intense, hasn't it? I talked non-stop for 40 minutes. It's intense. So I try to remember some of it. And if you can apply 1 minute of it, good.
Could you tell us what is the most incredible experience you had while in Courtin?
There were no incredible experiences. It was really just, it was interesting. I bring my computer wherever I go so I can do my editing and answer my emails and things. Well, I left my computer in the plane in London, and then I left all my electrical wires and my connections in the plane in Kathmandu. So I had nothing to do on my computer. So then I just sat for 2 weeks every morning, went to first of all, the Tibetan, all the monks and nuns, like 1,000 of them, the nuns down the hill would come up and they'd do Vajrayogini self-initiation every night until midnight plus. The monks every morning would do Yamataka self-initiation, and then 24 hours a day, they're doing prayers and practices. And then in the room where Lama Zopa Rinpoche's holy body is, he's passed away and they're embalming, he's doing this process. About 40 people can fit in there. So every day people would come in, we recite certain practices. And then in the Chenrezig at 6:30 in the morning, we do certain motivations and prayers and practices, and then we do prostrations. Then in the mid-morning, we'd have Tara, Chitamani, and in the afternoon, we'd have Lama Chirpa, and in the evening, we'd do Vajrasattva. And that was it, 2 weeks. That's all I did every day. Just went in there and did practices and went to the cafe and had an espresso. And it was just nice to be there, that's all. Just good to be there, see people, see friends, people coming and going. You understand? I didn't go out anywhere. I didn't go down to the stoop. I didn't do anything else. I just did that. There was no incredible experience. It was just nice to be there.
Yeah, but that's an incredible experience.
Yeah, and the thing is, the main one for me, the main thing for me from all of this, apart from this sense of urgency of requesting Lama Zopa to come back quickly in the body and blah, 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 all that's so important. But of course, the biggest one for all of us has to be the wake-up call, This all happened to me. Impermanence, realizing death and impermanence. The Lamas say, forget realizing bodhicitta, forget emptiness, forget renunciation even of giving up attachment, just realizing impermanence, realizing that life is fragile and it could end at any moment and will end at any moment. Then when we get that, and it's internalized, it brings incredible focus and no wish to waste a single second, a sense of urgency, but a joyful sense of urgency, because your life is so precious. That's the really big one I tried to get from this, Not that I'm saying I do it, I still love my sleep every night and everything. That's the answer, George.
Very good.
Okay, done. So you think whatever's been helpful today, thank you for your questions, Christine, and thank you, sweetheart. I'll forget your name.
Su Yang.
Su Yang and Su Yang. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So we just think 90 minutes, 80 minutes, whatever we've been, 60, 70, whatever. As many moments as there have been is as many seeds we've planted. Be happy about that. And nothing goes astray, it all goes into our memory. So this is good, we can dredge it up and work with it. And continue to never give up, working on ourselves, developing our own wisdom, so we can then, like Christine's talking, be a benefit to others, conflict resolution, having the wisdom to know how to work on ourselves and then how to help others. Changchul, Semchul Rinpoche, Ma Ke Panam Ke Guchig, Ke Panyam Pa Me Pa Yang Gong Ne Gondu Paba Shok. That's it, people. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, darling people. See you next time. There we go.
Thank you.
Thank you, sweethearts.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you.